This week, KTM announced their new extra spec R version of the 990 Duke, and look, the 890 Duke R was one of my favourite bikes to ride on the road in terms of grins per mile. So can this one possibly live up to the same expectations? Well, in this video, we'll go through the 10 key things that you need to know about it to find out. So yeah, a bit of context. The 890 Duke had an R model with lots of extra spec, but last year when the 890 Duke became the 990 Duke with a big update including more capacity of course, but also visual redesign and some tweaks to the chassis, the R model was dropped. That was never going to be the case for long though, and so now we've got the R model back for the 2025 model year. So look, it's the same LC8C 947cc parallel twin with the 435-degree firing interval. But the key difference with this one versus the standard 990 Duke is that it does get a new map. That means it makes 7 more PS at the top, which takes it from 123 to 130, and that definitely puts it at the top end of what you can expect for a 900-ish naked, and it's more than a Kawasaki Z900 for example, or a Yamaha MT-09. Is it worth it though, over the standard bike? Well, maybe where you're revving the engine out properly on the track on a regular basis, but if you're riding it purely on the road where you're spending more time in the middle of the rev range, then the difference is probably going to be fairly negligible. The frame, I believe, is largely the same as the standard 990, and the whole package still comes in at 190 kilograms, so nice and light, although it is worth pointing out that the center of mass does sit a little bit higher than the 990 Duke, and that's partly down to a little bit more travel on the fork they say, but also a steeper angle at the swing arm. The idea here of course is to lift the whole bike, so the seat height and the ground clearance figure are both up by 15mm, and KTM say that allows for 3 more degrees of lean angle, which is always going to be welcome when you're out on the track. Then they also say a redesign to the frame and swing arm means a new suspension linkage is in place, and that allows for a little bit more mechanical grip under hard riding. As you'd expect for a KTM, suspension is from their own brand WP, with the Apex lineup providing the fork and shock. Now like I say, there's a little bit more travel on the fork, so it's now 143mm versus the 140 of the standard bike, but also they say they've reduced the travel on the shock by 10mm to compensate for that new linkage. Both are fully adjustable, but specifically for the fork they've made it a little bit fatter, so it's now 48mm instead of 43, and so naturally that's going to make it more rigid, and in fact they give a specific figure for this with a 34% increase in stiffness. Then they've also revised the settings and the internals, so they say they've given it a sportier feel, and so you'd have to assume it's going to be a bit firmer and therefore better suited for those smooth surfaces on the track and also harder riding. Now like the 890 Duke, the 990 Duke gets upgraded brakes versus the standard 990 Duke, so you've got Brembo Stylema radial monoblock calipers up front on big 320mm discs, and so yeah, more fancy calipers versus that base model, and also the discs are 20mm bigger, so I'd expect a bit more power and also a better feel at the lever, and that's also going to be aided by the fact that it gets a Brembo MCS radial master cylinder, and KTM claim a more precise feeling under braking, ensuring dominant performance in all circumstances. Wheels are actually carried over from the 1390 Super Duke R, although there is a little bit of adaptation for this particular model, and these are wearing Michelin's Power Cup 2 tyres, which, in Michelin's own words, are designed for the track and approved for the road, so maybe not the one that you want for kind of all-round riding, but certainly if you're trying to get the most out of the bike, then these will do the trick. A quick recap on the riding position, because it is really quite tall now, so they say it's 15mm up from the standard bike, and that was already at 825mm, so this one will be 840, and I think that's probably going to be a little bit too tall for some people, but it will allow for that more aggressive riding. So look, now they've announced this R model, you might be trying to pick between the two, and I definitely recommend going down to the dealer and sitting on both if you can before you make your mind up. KTM recently announced a massive TFT Dash for their new bikes. It's 8.8 inches in diagonal measurement, and this is one of the first bikes to get it. The amount of space on it means you can get a bit of a split screen going on, so you can have, basic riding information on one side and maybe something like nav on the other. And so from a practical perspective, it probably is quite good and I'm looking forward to testing it out, but I will say it does look maybe a little bit out of place on a naked bike like this. You know, perhaps if you've got a bit of a fairing where it's wrapping around the dash, an adventure bike for example, or a tourer, or even a sports bike, then maybe it wouldn't stick out quite so much, but here it is quite a prominent feature at the front end, and so I'd love to know what you think of it in the comments. Would you take all that screen space from a pure usability perspective, or do you think it's too detrimental to the looks? Now, switchgear is also revised with a new layout to help you navigate this new dash, and of course you've got a whole host of connectivity and navigation features, as well as a full suite of riding modes and rider aids, and there are a couple of additions, including a new Sport ABS setting and also a Supermoto Plus ABS. Now, regular Supermoto ABS is something you see on a lot of KTM bikes, and the general idea is it switches off the ABS on the rear wheel to allow you to lock up the rear to slide the bike into a corner. But look, no specific details on what this Plus version does, so I look forward to finding out more and trying it out myself. Now, naturally, the styling has been pulled in line with the regular 990 Duke with that new headlight design, but to differentiate this model, it gets its own dedicated paint job with what they call a white color trim and graphic, complete with matte black and white accents, and an electric orange gloss powder coated frame. Inspiration for this one is said to come from the sort of Super Duke R lineup, with the second gen model that they say was made from 2011 to 2013 specifically called out for this exact finish. Now look, no price on this one as of yet, but I would expect it to potentially be a bit of a sticking point for this bike, because when the base bike went from the 890 Duke to the 990 Duke, it really was a substantial price increase. When the last R model, the 890 Duke R, was launched in 2020, it was just £10,399. Whereas now in 2024, even the standard bike is £12,999. So realistically, this R model is probably going to be up around the 14 to 15 grand mark. And that means it's really gone from something that was a bit of good, cheap fun to something really quite serious in price. On top of that, you know, there's a lot of bikes more so around the 10 grand mark, like the MT-09 that we mentioned. The Z900 has just been updated. And also you've got the new CB1000 Hornet packing almost 150 horsepower and starting at just £8,999. So this bike is realistically going to have to be really very good out on the road in order to justify it. Although, like I say, the previous generation was exactly that. So I'm expecting this one to be every bit as good, if not better. Still, I'd love to know what you think, so let me know in the comments. Have they overcooked the price a bit, or do you simply get what you pay for? Only a proper test will tell, but in the meantime, I'll put my review of the standard bike on the screen now that I shot earlier this year, so you can give it a click and give it a watch if you haven't already. Do hit subscribe as well if you want to see more of the latest motorcycle news like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you next time.